Epilogue. The Prince. Prince Bastian sat back in his chair, the velvet fabric of the seat's cushion rustling softly against his shoulders. In front of him stood a side table made of an ornately carved wood, embossed with gold leaf around its edges. In fact, every piece of furniture within the spacious room had been handcrafted with meticulous detail. From the windswept sails carved into the marble of the fireplace mantel to the subtle clouds painted on the domed ceiling above. Even the four posts of the bed had been carved to give the impression of being reeds swayed in an invisible wind. The prince noticed none of it. He had focused all of his attention on the simple wooden board made of square spaces in a 10 by 10 pattern and filled with dozens of figurines. It was Pado, a traditional game of strategy amongst the Badawai. The board was broken into 4 sections, each 5 squares by 5 squares. Those 4 sections represented the 4 seas. And within each section, the 2 players' ships, represented by the game pieces, waged battle. Alongside the board lay a deck of aged cards. After each set of turns, a player took a card from the deck, laid it beside a section of the board, representing the sailing conditions for that sea and affecting the movement of pieces within the corresponding 5 by 5 section. It had been described to him as simple to learn. Currently, he disagreed with that assessment. This is, he thought wryly, rather much. He had always been drawn to games of strategy, and every culture had a predominant one. Here in the Bada Republic, Pado was played as something like a rite of passage for school-aged children, a fact which did little to encourage the Trevelarian prince. Pado was like the culture that had created it, deceptively nuanced and complex. Beside the deck of cards, a small cup of dark coffee steamed. After a long moment, looking at the board, Bastian leaned forward and moved one of his smaller ships to an adjacent tile, then grabbed the coffee cup and sat back once more. "Your turn, I believe," Bastian said, then gingerly took a sip. The coffee had been well made, a smoothness covering a small host of delightful flavors. Across from him, Ambassador Susho sat with her hands gently holding her own cup of coffee, eyes looking through its wisp of steam to the board below. Bastian thought her attractive by Badawai standards. Her skin was as dark as the coffee she sipped, without blemish or wrinkles, despite being the prince's senior by a decade at least. She had weaved the strands of her hair into braids that fell around her narrow shoulders, adorning the braids with small threads of pure silver. Like all Badawai, she was thin and lithe, her every motion both quick and careful. The Badawai were not generally taller than someone from Trevelar, but their thin frames gave them that appearance. Susho smiled before locking her eyes on Bastian and gently shaking her head. The way the points of her teeth gleamed in the early morning gave her a predatory look which both unnerved and allured Bastian. "One day," she said slowly, "you will learn to play with your eyes open." She leaned forward and took a stubby little piece from the north quadrant of the board and moved it into the east quadrant, pinning Bastian's flagship and spelling certain doom within a matter of moves. "Well," Bastian said with a chuckle, waving a hand in acknowledged defeat, "I should not be surprised, Ambassador. I doubt any of the king's house could best one of the Badawai with the smell of ocean air drifting from the window." Susho mused, taking a sip. "Perhaps next time, young prince. The day is early and you await the chancellor's call. Perhaps your mind is simply preoccupied." Bastian nodded in appreciation for the small extension of grace. Though the prince did not feel it necessary, Ambassador Susho was compelled to provide him ways to maintain his honor in the face of minor embarrassments, such as losing a game of Pado. It served as a sign of respect and kindness, though Prince Bastian would have instead preferred the Chancellor's commitment of troops and supplies. One step at a time. Speaking of the Chancellor's summons, you do not happen to know when that will be? Susho frowned. I do not. Exceptions abound for you, Prince of Trevelar. 3 days, one after the other. The Chancellor has given you her first counsel of the day. I've not seen this, and I'm unsure if it will last. It must last. Bastian leaned forward and caught a gentle whiff of the ambassador's perfume, which threatened to make him as heady as a schoolboy. Our meetings cannot end until Trevelar has what it needs to keep Terras Regis out of the hands of Katsuraka. Perhaps, Susho sighed. It is true, Bastian urged. Imagine, Ambassador, the borders of Katsuraka expanded with access to the great harbor. How long will it be until they sail along the coast, burning as they go? By next winter, they would be raining lightning and fire down on your ships, setting your sails and hulls alight, tossing the stones of your great palace back into the sea. Bastian worked his hands about as he spoke, gesturing to the palace in which they now sat. Susho nodded slowly. Perhaps, Prince, but it is not I who you need to convince. And that is all too true. Bastian stood, pacing towards the window on the other side of the room. But the Chancellor is not an easy woman to persuade. It is all perhapses, and that could be, and on and on. She waits to see how the conditions are on the seas. She practices wisdom, Prince Bastian. It is what the Senate expects of her. It is what our people expect of her. It is cowardice, Bastian thought, but he kept those words to himself. Out the northern-facing window, he could see the familiar blue horizon of the sea. To the left, the early morning sun yawned its light over the city of Hanigu, the capital of Bada. Below, a city of white stone and golden-domed rooftops stretched out far and wide, ending only where the foaming waves began. The Seraph Isles would be visible when the morning fog subsided. This city will burn like Worcester, Bastian thought, his memories of fire and ash transposing themselves onto the cityscape below. Bastian half turned toward Susho, who still lingered in her chair across from the Pado board. You've lived amongst our people for many years now, a liaison between your republic and our kingdom. Trade has been good, no? The gold has flowed. Our people have been at peace. We reinforced your borders when tensions rose with Velik. Bastian's voice trailed off. He scratched at his chin, feeling the freshly shaven skin there, picking lightly at a small scab. Susho said nothing. She had set her coffee down and folded her hands in her lap, eyeing the prince with an expression that gave nothing away. Tell me, Bastian continued, do you think our people are worth saving? Susho cocked her head to the side, her eyes becoming distant. I do think your people are worth saving, she said finally, nodding her head as she spoke. I am simply unsure if they are capable of being saved. Bastian's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, and he turned back to the sea with forced control so as not to give her the impression that he was offended. Yet when he searched himself, he found he was offended, and deeply so. The ambassador's words struck a chord, insinuating weakness where there should be strength. Bastian worked through potential rebuttals in his mind, thinking through which ones he should try out on Susho in case the Chancellor said something similar. A knock rattled the door of his chambers. He turned toward the door as it opened by one of the guards, glancing into his chamber. In a world of thin and airy clothing, a pair of heavily armored guards in the royal orange looked clunky, odd, and very reassuring. My lord, Captain Tinreal said, his voice sharp and alert, despite the first rays of sunlight. The Chancellor requests your presence with haste. With haste? Bastian asked, looking at Susho, who looked equally confused. Did she say why? No, my lord. Should I tell her messenger that... We're coming, Captain. Tell the messenger to lead the way. Bastian stepped into a large, dome-shaped room he had never seen, perhaps 25 yards in diameter. It lay empty of any furnishings. The curved walls were painted carefully in dark blue and white, an imitation of the night sky. At the center of the ceiling was a window, the only source of light Bastian imagined at noon. At the center of the ceiling was a window, the only source of light. Bastian imagined at noon the sun would shine down directly into the center of the room, though he was unsure why that would be important. Around the edges of the room stood small clusters of strangely dressed Badawai. Instead of the tight-fitting clothing worn by most, these wore flowing robes of pure white, which trailed behind them. Where most of the stations of government were dominated by women, these were all men, and strange ones at that. They bore thick beards, had unruly hair, a fashion unheard of amongst the Badawai politicians and commoners, who preferred clean-shaven faces, pristinely trimmed hairlines. Bastian recognized them only from rumors. They were the Suengiga, the priests of the Jegja Jumin, the religious order of the Republic. Outsiders were not allowed within the temple or the holy places of the Jegja Jumin. One of these priests knelt in the middle of the room, head bowed. Though he faced away from the prince, Bastian could see his back rising and falling slightly with ragged breaths. Bastian turned to Susho as she came into the room behind him. What is this? He asked in a whisper. Susho looked about quickly, then dropped her head into something like shame or reverence. She spoke as quietly as she could, so much so that Bastian nearly missed her words. This is a holy place, Prince Bastian. Bow your head quick. Bastian did so, dropping his gaze to the floor where his glossy black boots shone in the faint light of the room. He stayed like that for a long time, totally unsure of himself, and wondering if he was being made the fool. And then Chancellor Jia stepped into the room, her slippers hardly making a noise as she strode past Bastian, saying, Arise, Prince. Prince Bastian raised his head and followed the Chancellor with his eyes as she strode through the room to stand next to the priest at its center. She was old, even by Badawai standards, her olive skin wrinkled with age, her eyes heavy with burdens. Still, she stood tall and confident, a dominating force in the room. Tell me, do you know where you are? Her voice sounded like a song, gentle and rhythmic. She looked at Bastian, awaiting an answer. No, Chancellor Jia, I do not. Jia nodded. You stand in the center of the palace. It is a holy place, one where no outsider has ever stepped. This is an unprecedented moment, Prince Bastian. I want you to understand that. Bastian nodded, but kept his mouth firmly shut, lest he open it and say something dreadfully stupid. Here kneels Dal, one of the priests of our order. Morning and night, at all hours of every day, one of the priests kneel in this very spot and prays to God on our behalf. Sometimes, when our God so chooses, he makes his ways known to our priests. Often, through the one who kneels here. She gestured to the center of the room. Half an hour ago, Dal was enraptured with a vision, or so we believe. Prince Bastian said nothing. Every question he could think to ask felt wrong, as though every one of them could set off a whole slew of diplomatic problems. Silence often proved best in times like these. This vision, if true, changes everything we've understood about your war with Katsuraka. She stepped forward as she spoke, her eyes narrowing on Bastian. It changes what is at stake, what is involved, and even the scope of the conflict. Jia let silence hang in the room as she slowly stepped closer to the prince. Bastian did not mean to speak up, but before he could help it, he asked, I do not understand, Chancellor. What is this vision you speak of? What new information has come to light? Jia frowned. When she spoke, she closed her eyes as though to distance herself from the words. The Ancient One is loosed in Lazarus again, Prince Bastian, and that may spell doom for us all. And this ends book 1 of the Ricker duology. This is made available for free in an ebook format, as well as this audiobook format, because of people who have come and supported Living Tome Publishing and Living Room Disciple as a whole financially on a monthly basis. If you want to know more about how to support us, you could do that by just simply purchasing a copy of the book, or you can support us monthly on our Substack. All the information is in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the Tragedy of Oli Ricker, book 1 of the Ricker duology. And now I will read the acknowledgments. Once upon a time, I thought writing was a solitary activity, something one did with the aroma of coffee in the air, rain drizzling outside, and when all was quiet in the house. Or perhaps the perfect hum of noise from a background cafe. With the rise of independently published books in generative AI, I'm sure this solitary practice is very true for many. It was not for me in this book, though. More than a dozen people have come alongside me to bring the Tragedy of Oli Ricker to fruition. They have lent their time and attention, their skills and expertise, often for nothing in return but my deepest gratitude. I do not, and have never, deserved such love and support. What follows is my best attempt to ensure the memory of their contribution lives on as long as this book does. First, to my amazing editing team. To Kaylee, who is the first person to ever read Oli with an editing eye. Without you, we would have a far more simplistic book, free of the nuance and complexities these characters deserve. Thank you for creating space to dream together. To Emily Whitten, thank you for coming alongside me in the Living Room Disciple as a whole. I didn't, embarrassingly, know an M dash apart from a hyphen before you came along. This book would have been a grammatical mess without you. And to Leila Wright, thank you for going the distance on this project. From early chapter reads in the End Writers Group to heading up Living Tome Publishing and bringing this to fruition. You have forced me deeper into intentionality with my words, and you have encouraged me every step along the way. We will be reviewing your debut book soon, and I better appear in your acknowledgments page. And to all the others in the End Writers Group, Kim, Charlie, and John, you've encouraged me more than I could ever possibly convey. Thank you. To Emily at EAH Creative, thank you for bringing our amazing cover to life, taking a vague image that exists in my imagination and bringing it onto the page. It's no simple thing, but you managed it beautifully. Look at that. To Austin, who not only read an early draft, but has been an amazing friend for nearly 2 decades. Wow, we're getting old. Never have you stopped encouraging me, and I will never be able to convey just how grateful I have been for you. And to Eric, who first said, I'll do it with you, when I threw out this crazy idea about the Living Room Disciple. You've stuck around through all of its forms and shapes, and you have unfailingly supported this newest iteration. Thank you for being so excited for Oli and for what God has for us in the future. But more than all the others, my wife and children have leaned in and pushed me forward on this journey. To my boys, Henry, Caleb, Owen, and Luke, thank you. You four inspire me with your imaginations, and you push me to be a better man. Thank you, Luke, for reading an early draft of Oli without permission and telling everyone your favorite book was the one my dad wrote. Thank you to Owen for sitting in my lap on those long days as I read and reread drafts to myself aloud. And to each of you for starting a book fundraiser and being the first financial backers of this venue. The small coins you put into that paper bag had more eternal significance than you can ever imagine. And to Brittany, without you, there would be no Oli at all. For you alone read those earliest and very awful drafts, and you chided me for giving up. It is for you that I picked up Oli's tale again. Always I write to you as my audience, hoping to make you fall in love with Oli, Layla, and Leonie. I cannot say how grateful I am that you have stayed with me through every adventure the Lord has sent us on. May we always dance through minefields together. And to you, reader, listener, for whom this book was written, thank you for every word read and every page turned. I pray this story blesses you and finds its place as one drop in the river of your imagination.